Welcome to the fourth episode of Under Control. I'm Paul Bartlett, and today's guest is Jim Rumph from Wipfli, one of the top 20 accounting firms in the US. Jim is a senior advisor in the financial services division and has in-depth expertise in the area of risk management and IT compliance. On this episode, we will cover how Wipfli is taking accounting to the next level by being a technology and implementation advisor to its clients. Also, we will touch upon how cybersecurity and forensics plays a crucial role in this ever-changing digital age. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining. How are you doing there?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Jim. I'm really curious about this topic that we are going to be talking about today around risk management and compliance, because we get obviously a lot of questions coming our way, certainly with our solution, with how it does comply with different regulations within the European Union, but also in the US as well. So I think first of all, just get started with just introducing yourself and giving us a little bit of background about you and your company.
Yes, sir. Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. I always love to come on podcasts and talk about things like risk management and IT controls. Always looking out for helping our clients and providing good advice. And I know this is a big topic these days about risk management and compliance, as it should be. As it should be. We're trying to do things to protect our clients and consumers. So always, again, appreciate the opportunity to talk about things such as this.
It's all yours.
Yes, sir. So a little bit about myself. I'm a senior manager
Mm-hmm.
in our risk advisory group here at Wipfli. Just a little bit about Wipfli. We're a top 20 accounting firm here in the U.S. We have about 50 offices, most of those in the U.S. We do have a couple overseas, but really we strive to be a little bit more than an accounting firm. When we think about accounting firms, we think about traditional audit and tax, but we try to go beyond that and really be an advisor to our clients. That includes helping them with things such as technology consulting, technology implementations, kind of digital transformation. That's a buzzword that we talk about a lot, and I'm sure we'll dig into in today's podcast. But helping helping clients in more than just traditional accounting areas such as audit, tax, other areas we operate in wealth management, benefits consulting, of course, cybersecurity, fraud, and forensics is a big part of our practice too. And we do this across many different industries: manufacturing, healthcare, government, nonprofits. I spend most of my time in financial services,
Right.
banks
Mm-hmm.
and companies that do work with banks. Of course, this is all heavily regulated industries. So I spend most of my time in that financial services realm. I do have a few other clients, but going back to how you started it, I really help around IT risk management at a very high level.
Right.
We do that in a variety of different ways: penetration testing, stock reports, risk assessments, social engineering, and other technical audits. So I spend most of my time in financial services realm, but have other clients in other industries as well. And we help clients in multiple different ways: risk assessments, SOC audits, IT audits, penetration testing, and kind of those technical audits. But at the end of the day, what I tell people I do is I try to make my clients more secure, or make sure they realize how secure they are. And what I always tell, that's a very long-winded answer of what I do, but to shorten that up a little bit, what I tell my mom I do is I help my clients be more secure.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about, trying to help them make sure they understand all these risks out there, because there's a lot of noise about
Mm-hmm.
these areas: cybersecurity and compliance and regulations. So I try to help my clients just be more secure.
Yeah. And to that point, I think there's a lot of rattling the cage, right, about the things that you need to comply with. And anybody that's either starting out on a business or trying to transition to moving from filing cabinet online is overwhelmed with potentially all of the regulations and control measures that need to be put into place. And I was just wondering to see, how do you see the sector evolved over your period of time of working in that specific area of risk management and helping companies, let's say from 5, 6 years ago to today, transition with the right technology stack?
Sure, great question. Good way to start. In financial services, it's a very interesting time. Uh,
Hmm.
the industry itself has been very conservative in the past. in the U.S., especially with banks and kind of those legacy financial institutions. It's just a little bit more
Hmm.
conservative industry. But really, over the past, say decade or so, we're seeing so much investment coming in now, so many more entrepreneurs get involved, a lot more innovation around these financial services. So I am seeing a whole lot of change over the past few years. And again, it's new to this industry because it's again traditionally just a little bit more conservative industry. We think about in the kind of quote unquote old days, going in and getting a loan, you go into your bank or your mortgage lender, fill out your paperwork, for a certain type of loan and go through the traditional process. But these days, with all this new technology innovation, you have a lot more options, I guess is the best
Hmm.
way to put it. One of our clients actually, uh, they partner with a big box retailer. So, say you're a construction company, you go into a big box retailer to buy a bunch of goods, you can get maybe a micro loan right there at checkout. I mean that
Hmm.
is completely different than the kind of traditional way of thinking about loans
Hmm.
and lending. So a lot of new innovation coming into this sector now, and I think it's great. I think it's great for
Hmm.
the consumer. It's meeting them where they need to be, but it is new for that industry. So we're seeing, as you would expect, challenges to
Yeah.
be overcome, especially in the area of compliance and security.
Hmm.
But overall, it's an interesting time to be in this industry.
Hmm. And you would traditionally think about looking back in the old days that kind of compliance would have the upper hand, but I can see personally as well that compliance is kind of being pushed these days to conform to the technology that's available today, right? Are you seeing the same kind of thing?
Yes, I think, and first of all, I always like to tell my clients, compliance is not really the same as security,
Mm.
and security is not compliance. So they're two different things. And certainly, with all this new innovation and new types of companies coming into regulated environments, what I've seen can be a little bit of a culture shock.
Hmm.
For these fintechs, these financial technical companies that are popping up to solve very specific problems, who may not be used to uh, the regulations and the laws. So it can be tough for them.
Hmm.
Traditionally, banks and kind of the legacy financial services clients, they're used to
Hmm.
regulations. They're used to the compliance. But again, with the rapid innovation of new types of products, it can butt heads a little bit with compliance and security. So making sure everybody's on the same page, everybody realizing that compliance is an important part of the business, and the ultimate goal is to make it safe for the consumer, for your customers. And I think once people adopt that approach and embrace the regulations, embrace the compliance aspect of it, I think that's the first step.
And where do you see potentially new, for example, you've got fintechs coming in, or you've got existing companies that are transitioning to maybe going online or looking at different technology stack, and with the plethora of different technologies that are out there, where do you see the pitfalls are with regards to either new startups or existing companies? Where does they always run into difficulty around regulation and compliance?
And another good question. What we see, and I participate in a couple of incubator type programs.
Hmm.
I'm based here in Georgia and Atlanta, and we have a lot of these types of companies, these types of fintechs, and what we're seeing is it's been very good lately. These new fintechs are engaging with banks and people in traditionally more heavily regulated environments and beginning that dialogue, because
Hmm.
that piece you're talking about of making sure we're compliant with all the rules and regulations, I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Hmm.
Certainly, we have to products that people want. That kind of goes without saying. But it's the back end things like those security issues and regulation
Hmm.
issues that are posing the biggest challenge, I think, for these new companies. But and it used to be kind of banks and fintechs were button heads a little bit.
Hmm.
Their banks maybe see fintechs encroaching on their turf,
Hmm.
and the fintechs are just trying to provide good solutions. But what's happening now, and I think it's great for the industry, is they're starting to work together more
Hmm.
often, and the banks can, teach these fintechs, how to operate in the regulated environment,
Hmm.
and in return, banks are getting access to new products that their customers want. But I do think that area is a big challenge. There's that general, kind of risk management area. But the more conversation that takes place between all these parties is the better, and ultimately the consumers going to be the one that ends up winning.
Yeah.
But you know, also thinking about regulations are changing very quickly
Hmm.
as well. So uh, something's always coming out new. I know in the U.S. we have a lot of different states doing different laws
Hmm.
around these areas, and it's just a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that sentiment as well, is that we deal with companies coming into us and they start asking us whether we can make them compliant. And of course, as an organization, we're not there to make them compliant. We can provide a level of security which might fit into the compliance standard or the regulation for a state or for some other particular sector, but we're not able to do that. And it's an interesting point that you raised, because I think what I've seen in the past at FinTech organizations are typically straight ahead with building a great application. Its customers can basically work from their mobile phone, do everything online, but then suddenly
Mhm.
they can run into issues with data security, for example, and how they store that data, and whether it fits with a regulation or not. Is that something that you typically see as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. And what we always encourage any company really is to make sure to think about the security risk
Hmm.
from the beginning, from the start. If you think about it at the very end, it's going to cause problems.
Hmm.
I'll use an example of email.
Yeah.
Think about email. It was never intended to be secure
Hmm.
from the very beginning. It was intended as a way to share information, and it does it very well to send emails and to share information. It does that job really well. But now, of course, we've seen email as becoming a primary attack vector. We're trying to
Yeah.
secure it, so it's a lot harder to do later on in the game. If you can think about security, think about data early in the process when you're creating these applications and objectives. If you can think about it early and take security into consideration from the start, it will help. So that's one thing I always recommend to my clients, just to think about it from the get go.
Hmm.
And I'll just mention one other thing that you talked about. I thought was pretty interesting. Your clients want you to make them compliant with certain regulations, and of course you can do that for your product, but that's not a full
Yeah.
solution for them, and it can't be. That's not your job. So with the prevalence of outsourcing, that will continue to be an issue in vendor management in particular,
Yeah.
making sure companies know how to manage their vendors.
I think this was also one of the areas when we talk about vendor management and we talk about different technologies. There's a trust requirement there. Okay, is what am I procuring? What am I taking from this vendor that's going to secure my data, or secure the trust for my particular customers as well? Is that where you're also helping customers as well in choosing the right technologies to get them um, secure and working in an effective and efficient manner?
Sure, we spend a lot of time helping clients do that and making sure their vendor management program is in place. And
Hmm.
one thing I always preach to my clients is, you can never outsource responsibility. So you always have to, again, make sure you use your trusted vendors. I think outsourcing is a great way to solve a lot of these problems,
Hmm.
but just realizing that you're not necessarily outsourcing risk. It's the risk is a little bit different, right? So you may not be in charge of, securing data. Maybe your vendor's doing it, but you just want to monitor your vendor. You have that communication and that relationship with your vendor to make sure you're all are both on the same page at the end of
Yeah.
the day. And as
Yeah.
long as you have that communication, I think that's so important.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think as a whole, the industry will continue this trend of outsourcing
Hmm.
because, again, I mean, like your solution, you solve a very specific problem,
Hmm.
and you can probably do it more efficiently and effectively than your clients can by themselves. So I think outsourcing is for these particular problems is a great way to do it. But as you say, vendor management becomes a big piece
Hmm.
when we see some of our clients get audited by the examiners and the regulators. Vendor management has just the focus on vendor management has been increasing over the years, and certainly I think it continues to do it. But if you have those trusted partners, it can be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, because especially under these times as well, there's so much pressure on cost, right?
Mm.
There are companies out there maybe outsource and try to do things remotely from, working with other countries, providing their IT services or IT management stack. But do you see that there is potential risks? I mean, the rewards are there financially, but the risks as well.
Mhm.
Is that something that you also see? Do you have any like horror
Sure.
stories from that? Because I know that I've heard horror stories in the past of, basically things being outsourced to different countries, and then suddenly, they're not in control of that data anymore. So they're entrusting people with that data in a cloud service somewhere remotely in a far-flung country.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what I see, I don't really have any horror stories, but here's what I see happening that causes problems. When somebody in a business unit hires a vendor without consulting maybe the information security group or the compliance group or whatever group's in charge of kind of monitoring that. And then you create this relationship, and then the vendor comes and says this, this, and this. Maybe that's not good. Maybe you want to share that information, or maybe you don't. But as long as we really need to again concentrate on deciding those things, before we signing a letter with a contract with a client. That's where the kind of, to me, the horror stories happen is when everybody is not on the same page going into a relationship about what we have to put in and what we're going to get out. If we solve those problems in the beginning and think about the security topic in the beginning, then that usually leads to a much better success. So I think that's the big takeaway, and of course ongoing vendor management
Hmm.
around the companies, and making sure y'all are on the same page about how we treat security and how we treat data security. But usually the horror stories happen is when you think about that halfway through the implementation.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's never where you want to be.
Hmm. Yeah, I had that experience as well with a company that just basically put their line of business straight into finding a tool, which was ours, for evaluation. They went through, they said, "Yeah, it's great," and the next minute they overlooked the whole security aspect of things. They needed to get engaged with the security team, which they weren't even aware of, which surprised me, because you would think that internally inside these organizations that these kind of things would be well scripted out, but it tends to be in larger organizations.
You would think that.
Yeah, yeah, behind the shiny web pages and advertisements, that there are situations where people are just unsure about what the process is internally. And is that something that where you help them with build that process out? So as well as taking the risk management, what procedure needs to be put in place, and what's the best way to do that to be able to get to an evaluation of a particular technology?
Yes, we do help with that some.
Mhm.
It's interesting you talked about, especially with larger companies, maybe the hand's not talking to the foot. This happens all the time. And as auditors, we try to get in there and talk to everybody and get multiple perspectives from the business line, from information security, or maybe from IT. And sometimes when we talk to all these different groups, we see that obviously not everybody's on the same page.
Mhm.
So where we can, we try to help those clients put in processes. We got
Mhm.
to have defined processes for how we tackle these things. So if we're hiring a new vendor, these people need to be involved from the very beginning, making sure we got that written down, making sure we don't have to think about it when we go, to procure a new solution. That we have those processes in place to make sure those things that need to happen do happen. So we do spend a lot of time talking with clients about that because that is a challenge.
Mhm.
Making sure everybody who needs to be involved is involved, but also, we don't want to slow down the process. We don't want to make it overly
Yeah.
cumbersome for, to us to get new products because we need new solutions and help from vendors, and we don't want to slow that
Mhm.
process down too much, but we do want to provide some oversight. So a lot of it goes back to just general business process. I mean, you can if it's a bad process in the beginning and you try to automate it, it's just going to be an automated bad process.
Yeah.
So we always want to think about that kind of stuff from the beginning.
Yeah, and that has happened when we say about automated processes. It's about, again, somebody needs to sign something off. I know myself, I've experienced it to the frustration of the customer as well. The amount of steps and stages they need to go through to get their hands
Mhm.
on a piece of technology. But it has to check all the boxes, right? So, and typically this is where it falls into the risk management category. And one thing I wanted to touch on, which I'm faced more and more with now, with dealing with customers, is the introduction of not that it's an introduction, but it's always been there. Is this data residency option or data sovereignty? Do you have any feelings or insights on that? Because it's one of the things that we face with quite frequently. Can we store our data within the US borders? Where's that data being stored? What kind of regulations in place? What's your view on that?
That's an interesting topic, and I
Mm,
see it just evolving almost day to day, especially with GDPR being implemented.
yeah.
Um, in the U.S., what is happening is California implemented a similar law related to GDPR.
Hmm.
New York has had a little bit different one, and honestly, all the states are probably coming up with their own.
Hmm.
So it's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure the answer to it yet. I
Hmm.
don't think anybody knows, but
Yeah.
we have some of my clients have been trying to just avoid issues, like that. Honestly,
Yeah.
just kind of kicking it down the road because I don't think anybody really knows the answer yet.
Hmm.
GDPR is new, and from what I can tell, not a whole lot of fines have been issued so far.
Hmm.
So everybody's kind of has a grace period to get compliant with that. Talking about going back to the intent of your question, like data sovereignty, knowing where your data is,
Hmm.
it's just going to keep going more. Those types of questions are going to just continue increasing,
Yeah.
and the big vendors will have to kind of figure that out,
Hmm.
especially in these regulated industries. And I think there's a push to do that. I mean, in the old days, we put it in the cloud, and it could be anywhere depending on
Hmm.
whose cloud it is. But I have seen vendors become more cognizant of that question, especially in areas such as financial services, which are
Yeah.
regulated. And I get it. I mean, I would want to know where my data is, from a business standpoint, if only just to make you sleep better at night, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a fully fleshed answer for
Yeah.
you because I think it's still evolving. But I think
Yeah.
those are the types of questions that we need to keep asking.
Fleshing out, yeah, because I mean, I typically tell my customers, they say, well, where's the data being stored? And we have a default location, but we give other options as
Hmm.
well. And usually, if you're dealing with an educational institution, it's the educational institution that's saying, right, you've got to have that data within the US borders, and then you want some justification for
Hmm.
why that's the case. And really, there's no justification
Hmm.
for it. It was based on
That's,
some it was based on some policy that was created 10 years ago, and it's never been changed. And for example, these days people are saying, well, as long as it's fully encrypted, or the regulations are
hmm.
stringent or as strict as what they are for here in the US, for example, we're okay with that. But one of the things that's
Hmm.
been sort of niggling away at me personally, when I'm asking these questions, is how does that affect cyber insurance, cyber security insurance, for example, which more insurance companies are willing to do and offer out there? Does that have any impact on the policy that they're procuring from these insurance companies? So yeah, those are all good questions that I'm also challenged with on a regular basis to find out. So if there's any listeners out there that can help us address those questions, then you can drop me a mail by any means. I just want to come on to the current situation right now with COVID. How have you guys been dealing with it personally as an organization and even as individuals? Because I think it's caught everyone out. And it's a topic that can't be ignored. And more importantly, what do you see your customers going through right now? As someone mentioned to me earlier on the previous podcast, it's kind of caught everyone off guard, out of balance. And yeah, people are still trying to come to terms and figure out not business processes, different ways of managing risk because
Hmm.
people are working remotely now. So what is it you see?
It's the topic of the day, or at
Yeah.
least the topic of the past 4 months. It's interesting time. It's strange times. Uh, I'm sitting here in my basement where I have my home office that I've been for the past basically 3 or 4 months. For our firm, we have a little bit different business model because we're constantly going to see clients. I
Mhm.
usually spend a lot of time at my clients' locations, visiting with them and working there. So that has pretty much gone away.
Mhm.
But our kind of business model, we were built for this to be
Right.
able to work from anywhere. So it hadn't really been much of a disruption for us in at Wipfli. We're doing a whole lot more online meetings where we
Mhm.
share screens, but really we've been able to kind of get our job done. But a lot of our clients a little bit different because it's a different business model, such as our bank clients. I mean,
Mhm.
they're on the front lines. They are essential. People need access to their funds and need access to their bank. So it's been more of a challenge for them. And we actually had I hosted a roundtable yesterday actually for a few of my banks to talk about this very issue because when COVID first hit a couple months ago, it was all about, hey, we got to get work done. We got to send everybody
Mhm.
home, but we have to get the work. So I think what we saw is the risk kind of tolerance, for cybersecurity went up a little bit because it had to, because we had to get our job done. But now, as this thing is stretching out, and we see that, hey, maybe there's not an end in sight at the end of the year or end of next summer. We don't know. The longer we do this, habits are changing. People are
Mhm.
getting, and for some people, realizing that, hey, maybe that's better than having a 2-hour commute every day.
Mhm.
So now we're starting to think about, okay, this being a more longer term issue, how do we manage those risks? Because you got people working at home.
Yeah.
We don't know how secure their home network is. We don't know, hey, do they have encryption over their Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Who else is in the house? So it's introducing new risks that we really hadn't focused on
Mhm.
that much anymore. So, and people are still trying to figure out, how to do that,
Yeah.
how to kind of manage those risks. And luckily, there's a lot of good solutions out there that are specifically geared to help these types of issues, including what y'all's product does. So it's an interesting time around this. I think a lot of change has happened and will happen. And one other point about this that we kind of talked about with my clients the other day is what we have shown is how fast we can really pivot if we
Mm.
need to digital products, to remote workforce. I mean, people, not just financial services, but did very quickly and shown that we can do rapid change
Mhm.
to meet our customer needs. And I think that's great, for all industries to show how fast we can adapt
Mm. Yeah.
circumstances. But of course, making sure we manage those risks in the process. Because
Yeah.
I was looking at the FBI report, they put out some threat reports every year, and I was just looking at their website, and the number of cybersecurity kind of cases that they handle, through May of this year is already greater than all of 2019.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of people trying to prey on all this
Yeah.
change and all this work from home situation. So
Sure.
um, yeah, so it's interesting times for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think there are some businesses out there. It's for them, regardless of people working from home, it's business as usual. Pre-financial results need to be reported to auditors. I've got one customer who came to us saying, "Hey, we need a solution and we need it fast because we didn't assume that we would not have auditors on site. Doing the books." We need to do the still would release the pre-financial results. So they're all working remotely. And for me, that was a use case that I didn't even think of, that suddenly the idea of auditors and finance teams not being able to meet anymore due to the COVID situation was, yeah, hey, there's a new space up there, basically in the cloud for a secure data room where these third parties or regulators and independent auditing teams need to work. So that really opened my eyes up as well, and also made me consider about the risks of working remotely. So it was good to get your insight on that. Just moving ahead now to the future, because I'm being conscious of time. What do you see happening from now on, from the aspect of regulation, risk management? Where is the finance industry heading? I mean, is there a future for bank branches, for example, or is it going to be all fintech in the future? Are we going cardless? What potential risks is there? There's a whole abundance of questions in there. So, but what do you see for the future?
Sure, I think we will continue rapid innovation. The amount of processes that will be digitized will keep increasing. As a result of that, data security issues and concerns and challenges will keep increasing as well.
Hmm.
And to me, in turn, that means regulations are not going to be lessened; they're going to be
Right.
more and more, especially when
Hmm.
we consider all the data breaches that have happened and will continue to happen. None of that is going to go away, anytime anytime soon. I don't think going back to when you mentioned about bank branches. I don't necessarily think they will go away, but they will change and they will evolve to customer demands. As consumers, we're used to kind of have everything we need maybe on our phone or on our a tablet or a laptop, and those types of product continue to be high in demand. So I do expect a lot of rapid innovation to continue to happen, and of course, again, as a result, more we will continue to collect more and more data, and then we have to secure that data and have to
Yeah.
show others that we're securing that data because we talked about outsourcing and vendors. The more vendors we have, the more we have to monitor those vendors and to make sure we know where our data is and then make sure it's secured. But I'm very excited about the future.
Hmm.
Some people get worried that maybe technology is going to take their jobs away and whatnot, and I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But I try to look at it from the perspective of that's going to maybe some doors will be shut, but a lot more doors will be opened.
Hmm.
In the technology space. So I've got really good hopes about technology and how it can make our lives better. And at the end of the day, technology is just a tool, and it
Yeah.
should be a tool used to make people's lives better. And I
Hmm.
think it has the capability to do that, and I'm really looking forward to how
Yeah.
the industry evolves.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the show, you mentioned digital transformation and what does that mean? All we can say potentially for some organizations that's come early. Some people are being forced to change now because of the situation. But I'm just always a little bit confused about the digital transformation terminology because companies are constantly, adopting, evolving. So it's a continuous process, right? It never ends. And I'm also thinking about, is it something that we'll see in the future where I'll be on a Zoom call with my bank manager rather than going in and facing them? Because it's not because of the COVID potentially, but because now we've found a more effective way, efficient way of working, and we're actually maximizing the benefit of technology, which I believe in the past has always been maybe underutilized. For our own product, for example, it was just used basically for a file repository, but now it's being used for many other things as well, because it always had that capability there, but now other people are finding other use cases and applying it to the maximum potential. So yeah. Okay, Jim, great discussion. Really happy to have had you on the show today. I wish you all the best and hopefully talk to you soon in the future. I'm going to call it a day for today. Thanks a lot for your time and your insight.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Jim. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode of Under Control. You can find links to all of our social platforms and to our guests in the episode description. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Join us in 2 weeks' time for the next episode.